Welcome everyone. Now, have we got everyone in, Meredith?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone to our second NF Wellness webinar. It's very exciting to be able to bring to you today Dr. Geoff McCowage from the Westmead Children's Hospital in Sydney. Geoff has been a bit of a champion for the neurofibromatosis community for a long time now, with his particular interest in managing NF and from an oncology perspective. Being a paediatric oncologist, he has led the international MEK Inhibitor study focusing on Trametinib and has been instrumental in establishing the upcoming TiNT trial that will happen across here and New Zealand. So welcome, Geoff, and thank you so much for your time today. And I know everyone is very keen to hear from you. As you can see, I think this is the biggest webinar turnout we've had to date, so that's very exciting.
Right. You're very popular.
So thank you so much. So what we will do is Geoff will give a presentation, and then once we've done that, should we have time, we will go to questions from you guys here today as well. Okay.
Well, thank you. Now,
Sorry, before you start, Geoff, I just want everybody to know that we are recording this session because there are some people who were unable to attend today. So just please be aware there's no need for you to be recording this at all. We will make it available to everybody after.
Cool. And I can talk all day and all night, as you know. How long have you sort of penciled in for this session?
And we've got about an hour, Geoff.
About an hour? Okay.
If we can kind of let you talk for as long as you need, and then you know, give people a few minutes at the end for those questions.
All right. Well,
I know everyone has heaps of them.
Okay, I will leave time. Maybe I'll cover some of them as we go. Now, can you now see a PowerPoint thing?
Yes.
And the title slide, is that what you're seeing?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, well, hello everybody. Yes, so I'm an oncologist. As you know, in neurofibromatosis type 1, I guess there's three main tumour types that happen in NF1. There's the optic nerve gliomas, optic pathway gliomas, which are a sort of low-grade brain tumour. There's the plexiform neurofibromas, which are technically not malignant but can be bad. And there's the malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumour, which I won't talk about much today because that's not relevant. I'm talking about this particular class of drugs called MEK inhibitors. And you'll see what MEK inhibitor means in a minute. Just to remind you, now, I'm using some slides. See these ones that say presented by Andrea Gross. Andrea Gross gave a talk at the ASCO meeting, and so did I. So I'm using some of her slides and some of mine, but I don't have her permission to do this. So when we do record it, I suppose we'll remove these pictures from it because I don't have her permission. I don't actually mind, but she works with Bridget Wiedemann, who you might have all heard of. She's like as big a guru in NF as there is, and Eva Dombey and some other people in America. But in any event, so first off, plexiform neurofibromas. And by the way, do you see my mouse when it moves and everything? Yeah, my mouse arrow? Renee, just nod your head. Okay. All right, so plexiform neurofibromas, PN is the abbreviation, occur in 20 to 50% of patients, and they arise from these things called Schwann cells, which is sort of they're like the plastic tubing on your electric wiring of your nerves, I suppose. And they just grow slowly, but they can get to a large size and they take on funny shapes and things. And, you know, a number of children have a plexiform neurofibroma, and we know it's there, but it's not causing a problem. It's not particularly big, or it's not in a bad place to cause a problem, but other ones can be in bad places and, and can keep on growing, and they can cause disfigurement and a cosmetic problem, or they can cause pain because they're right on a nerve, or they can cause what we call a functional impairment. So you can imagine this is restricting use of the shoulder here. And they can be life-threatening. They can compress the spinal cord or the airway that you breathe with, and you know, so they can be a big, big problem. And a small proportion of them, but a meaningful proportion, will progress and develop this malignant thing within them, and that's the worst thing, malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumour. And this is the pictures that Dr. Gross showed us of a boy who had one here, and you know, when he was 3 and slowly growing, and you know, this is a really terrible thing connected to all these nerves going down his arm from his neck. And in the past, the only thing you could do for these really was to cut them out surgically. Radiation therapy doesn't touch them, and there weren't any drugs that worked. So it was surgery, and surgery has its problems and isn't always possible. And if you know, you just go in and try to take this thing out, you can be sure you'll cause big damage to nerves. So a real problem. And here's some of our own patients, and this is a boy who's got them in the sciatic nerves of both legs and can't sit on a school bench and has pain in the back of his legs. And you know, this boy has one here in his jaw, and you know, starting to cause facial deformity. This is a common location. This one around the eye, which also, you can see the right eye here is pushed forward compared to the left eye, and that creates a cosmetic problem, and one that could just keep getting worse and worse and worse. So, you know, a potential real problem emerging. And here's a boy with that, again, going down both arms, the brachial plexus, it's called, and these nerves up here that go down to your arms. And, you know, they can stop the nerves working, but cause a lot of nerve pain and pins and needly sharp, they say lancinating nerve pain. So that's the problem. Now, this is to show you what's going on. This is a cell, and these are all the different chemicals in the cell. Now, what's meant to happen is cells get a message from somewhere, a good message from somewhere, let's say outside the cell, and it comes to this surface molecule in the cell that sends its information to one chemical, to another chemical, to another chemical, to RAS, to RAF, to MEK, to ERK, and that, you know, if the circuit is turned on, that's a message for the cell to grow and divide and do what you're meant to do. Or if it's not in the on position, it tells the cell, just take it easy, don't divide, don't grow, just sit there. And so the problem in NF1 is that this chemical RAS is meant to have an off switch on it provided by the NF1 protein. The NF1 chemical is meant to be an off switch for RAS. So it gets on switches from various places and it has an off switch. And the whole thing's in balance and it's meant to be controlled and work properly and work properly. Now, the problem here is that in neurofibromatosis, the off switch is impaired. That's the whole problem. That means that this whole circuit tends to be stuck in the on position. So this chemical just keeps on firing off go signals to RAF, to MEK, to ERK, to the cell. And that's what's going on in a plexiform neurofibroma or other tumours, is this stuck in the on position. It's as though someone put a brick on the accelerator of your car and you couldn't get it off and it's just constantly going. That's the whole problem. Okay, now, this is a chemical showing the same thing. But like I said, this RAS is stuck in the on position and it keeps triggering down here to get to the cell. One of those chemicals is called MEK. Don't worry about what it stands for. There it is, MEK. And fortunately, the melanoma people developed a bunch of drugs to block MEK. Because in melanoma, this has nothing to do with NF1, this circuit is also too active. So they've got BRAF inhibitors and they've got MEK inhibitors, and they work in melanoma. In about 50% of the patients have a BRAF mutation. All right, so that's what a MEK inhibitor does. It works in here to turn that off. So even though this is still saying go, 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 it stops that, and then it stops the message to make the cells grow. That's what a MEK inhibitor is, inhibits MEK. They're drugs, tablets, for melanoma and other cancers. And they're used in all sorts of places now, but in our particular situation of NF1, that looked interesting. And so one of the MEK inhibitors is called SELUMETINIB. Hasn't really been available in Australia, but this group, and Andrea Gross and Bridget Wiedemann and these Americans, did a trial to look at SELUMETINIB in patients with plexiform neurofibromas. 24 patients, and it's what you call a phase 1 study, where they give the first bunch of people a lower dose, and if it's all right, they give it to the next group at a higher dose and then a higher dose. And they got to this dose, I think, is the best dose to use. So that was good. They found, 25, they said, was the best dose. This dose was the one that was the best. So that's what that study was to do, work out a good dose. But each of these black bars represents an individual patient, and it's showing the % change in the tumour. So they all started at this point. And for instance, this patient's tumour reduced by about, what's that, about 47%. The tumour got smaller by 47%. And this patient's tumour, well, let's pick this one, got smaller by 30%. So that each bar is a patient, and what it's showing you is they all got smaller. 17 of the 24, they got smaller by 20% or more, which is what we call a partial response. Okay. Now, the ones that didn't have the 20%, it still got smaller. There's just still a win, because these things were getting bigger. They were growing. If you can just stop it getting bigger, that's a win. So that was enormously exciting. That's why it got in the New England Journal of Medicine, the best, biggest medical journal there is. There you go, Bridget Wiedemann. Right, so that was pretty exciting. Then in 2018, they presented the updated data now with 50 new patients who all got the right dose, the 25 dose. Average age of 10 years, 30 boys, 20 girls. And the median volume, the average size of it was about 500 mils. So a tumour about as big as a pint of milk, or, you know, one of those big, anyway, 500 mils. Okay, so now we've got 50 patients. And again, every bar is a patient. And 36% of them, so all of these have had a 20% reduction in size in volume. And the others had a reduction in volume, but it didn't meet the 20% figure. But that's still progress, right? These things were growing. And those two there, they're the ones that haven't had their scans yet at the time. So they didn't get bigger, but they didn't get, we don't know what happened to them at the time they presented the data. So that's further confirmation that selumetinib's good stuff. Now, the other thing to notice here is the color of the bars tells you after how many months of treatment did they get to the best response. So the dark blue bars, so people like this and this and this, the best response was after 24 cycles, 24 months of treatment to get to the best level of response. So that's telling you that these drugs work slowly. And unlike when you treat cancer, you give drugs and things shrink and melt, you know, in a month or two, and then they grow quickly as well. These are slow growing and slow shrinking. It's a long, slow process. But what about side effects? So in their group, a median, average 20 cycles they've been on. And the most common side effects were gastrointestinal, so a bit of diarrhea, this CPK increase. CPK is a chemical in your muscles, and if you have a bit of muscle breakdown, it gets released in your muscles. But it's more something they documented rather than it being a real problem. But the big ones are skin problems, rashes, acne in teenagers, various other blotchy rashes in various places, and this one, paronychia. Paronychia is, you know, when you get an infected toenail, ingrown toenail, this sort of redness around the toes and the fingertips. We see this all the time, very common. So really, it's all about skin rashes most of the time as far as side effects are concerned. So 4 of their patients actually went off the treatment because of problems. 1 for diarrhea, 1 for a bunch of kidney blood test results. 1 had weight gain, and 1 had just this ongoing paronychia thing, and they stopped. We're probably getting better at treating this. We know to put steroid creams on now and so on. Now, but what else? They also measured some other things, not just is the tumour bigger or smaller, but they measured some other things. They had 33 patients who, when they started, they either had a problem with muscle weakness or joint restriction, you know, muscle weakness, probably because the tumour was infiltrating a muscle or affecting the nerve. So 21 patients had abnormal muscle strength, and with treatment, they saw an increase in strength of the muscles. And that's very statistically significant. It was significant. Then they had 26 patients who had some sort of restriction of movement of a joint. And again, they found that these patients after a year had significant improvements in the way their arms and legs or wherever the joint restriction was. So that was good. But what about pain? These things can cause pain because they're in the nerves. 19 of their 50 patients in this study had pain more than 0 out of 10 as they went into the study. So the average pain score, there's this pain score called the NRS11 that you use in children and teenagers. So the average pain score was 3 at the start, and the average, and the average pain score after a year was 0. Now, there's still some with pain, but the average was 0, and that was very statistically significant. Now, what about pain interfering with life? The pain interference index. Well, if you ask the parents said that 28 patients had pain, saw their child as having pain that interfered with life. Now, maybe it wasn't pain like this at rest, but you know, if they got knocked in the playground, they had pain. If they sat the wrong way, they got pain. All right. So they had an average interference index of 1.8 at the start, and after a year it was 0.33. So parents reported their kids aren't having their lives messed up by pain as much. And if you ask the patients, likewise, the kids reported that their as far as pain interfering with their life, it was much improved. And that's after a year of treatment, before cycle 13. And this boy, for instance, had this thing in here, and with treatment, it reduced in size, and his mother said that he could move better, and he said he could wrestle more with his sister. That was pretty good. Now, we're going to have to pull those slides out. So I'm just going to repeat what I said for the sake of your recorded version. I'm just going to say that, again, that the team of Dr. Gross and Dr. Wiedemann in America have studied SELUMETINIB in now 50 or more than 50 patients. And they found that just about all of the patients had some shrinkage or at least stop growing of tumours. And they had improvements in strength and in pain and in joint restriction. And the main side effects were skin rashes, toenail, fingernail things, some diarrhea sometimes, and some blood test abnormalities that weren't particularly major, but they were there. So I'm just repeating that so that for the recorded people. This one I can show you though. Trametinib is a different MEK inhibitor. Again, it's on the market in Australia for melanoma and a few other things, and we use it in a few other things. But when the company decided to do a paediatric study to work out safe doses in kids, I said to them, can we please include the kids with plexiform neurofibromas? And they said yes. And then when we reported it, they said I could report it. So that was pretty good. But these are people from all over the world, from Britain and America and France and Canada. And so this was the experience of trametinib in children with plexiform neurofibromas that I presented after Dr. Gross did. And we had 26 patients, average age of 5 years. And that's the main thing to say, 26 patients. And here's the responses we saw in 22 patients that we had data on. When we did the report, we didn't have all the data finalized. But it's a similar thing that you saw in the last one. We're seeing a whole group of patients where the tumours are smaller, below the 20% figure. We're seeing some where they're smaller but don't quite reach the 20% figure, and one patient who apparently the tumour grew. So it's pretty similar to what we're seeing in the American experience. Here we go, 4 patients weren't really suitable for measuring very well. The tumours were a funny shape or something. So trametinib, selumetinib, similar result. And this just shows again the duration of treatment. And here are patients that are way out. This patient's at 2 years, but now I've got patients at 3 and 4 years out from treatment and still going. Couple more things to say. When it was a research study, you know, the drug companies, they make you study everything to confirm it's safe. We're doing echocardiograms of the heart and ECGs of the heart and eye tests and blood tests and everything. For all of that, I don't really think I saw any abnormalities in any of these things to speak of. It's all skin, skin, skin. The teenagers get acne. So nowadays I just put them straight on, you know, Doxycycline. Any of you that have teenagers with acne, it's an antibiotic that a lot of them take for acne. You can't give it to young kids. It makes their teeth discolored, but you can give it to teenagers. And for the toenails, we know to put on steroid creams and vinegar baths. And I know all you parents are on websites comparing techniques. There's all sorts of ways. Now, so I'm not saying none of these side effects will ever happen. We still check for them, but I don't check them as much as we did in the research study. Problem is, it seems like you might have to treat forever for plexiform neurofibroma. So if a patient has a bad enough plexiform neurofibroma that warrants treatment, you might have to treat forever. It seems that when you stop selumetinib, for instance, it starts growing again. So it might be forever. So it's a big commitment to go into, and these things are nothing compared to the side effects we see with high-dose chemotherapy in leukemia, for instance, right? They're not like that, but they're a significant imposition on your life. They're not things you just take on because there's a plexiform neurofibroma there. You know, it should be one that's more of a problem than just something you're seeing on a scan. We'll get to gliomas. How long do you treat gliomas for? Now, something new I can tell you. We decided to measure blood tests of immune function in children on trametinib. And so we've measured it on, I don't know how many we have, 25 or so patients. We've measured it here, and we haven't found any abnormalities. Children on chemotherapy have immune suppression on normal chemotherapy. But we've measured a bunch of blood tests in these children, immunoglobulin levels and T cell types and whether they've responded to their vaccines that they've had and things like that. And we haven't found any abnormalities. So I would think, you know, so I definitely think that children on trametinib, you know, they're fine. Go to school, go to the movies, swim in the lake, you know, do everything. I don't feel like that we need to be really cautious like we are with children on other chemotherapies, even though it's a cancer drug technically. Okay, so that's the plexiform neurofibromas. Now, the other tumor type that we see in children is a glioma. That's a low-grade brain tumor, but it's not always in the brain. It can be in the optic nerve, the nerve that goes back from your eye and sends messages back into your brain. So the optic nerve's really part of the brain. So you can get tumors of the optic nerve and then that area behind the optic nerve in the brain, and elsewhere. They're called low-grade gliomas, and a lot of kids with NF1 have one of these and they don't need treatment. It just sits there and it doesn't grow and it's not a problem. But if the tumor grows, and particularly if it's affecting vision, that's a reason to give treatment. And the treatment over the years was with chemotherapy drugs, intravenous chemotherapy drugs. And in Australia, it would mostly be a drug called carboplatin. It's an intravenous drug. It's a proper chemo drug. You need a central line and causes low blood counts and various other side effects, but pretty effective. And that's what we've used, and that's what we still do use. And usually it works. But if it works and then the tumor starts to grow again, then you start thinking, well, what can I try next? So the Paediatric Brain Tumor Consortium in America studied SELUMETINIB in this situation. And one group was the NF1 patients. And of their patients, there were 25 of them, 40% of them had a partial response. So now it's a 50% reduction. But if you looked at the 2-year progression-free survival, so start on the drug, if you looked at 2 years and looked at they're still alive and the tumor hasn't got bigger, hang on, I just got to tell these people I can't answer them. 96% of them did not get bigger during treatment. So one patient, the tumor got bigger. And that's a win in this disease. We don't need it. It's not going to melt away to nothing. We just want it to stop getting bigger. So that was really good. And again, this is the sort of plot. Each bar is a patient. So these ones had a 50% reduction. These had lesser reductions. And somewhere there's a patient where it got bigger. Pretty good. What about here at Westmead in NF1? Now, these slides are a couple of months since I did these numbers. So I'm 19 patients on Trametinib at the time I made them. It's probably 27 now, 28. 13 had plexiform neurofibromas, 6 had gliomas. The plexiform neurofibroma patients, so some of these were on the study and some of them are not on the study. And why did we think they needed treatment? 5 of them had tumors that were going to be very bad cosmetically, the appearance. 5 of them had tumors that were affecting nerves. 4 of them had bad pain. 1 had a mass in the tongue, and 1 had a tumor that was compressing the breathing. So here's an example. This white thing, okay, can you see what we're looking at here? This is someone who's lying on their back, arm there, tummy there, pelvis bones there. And here's this thing. So this is overlying your low back, where you get low back pain. It's overlying that white thing. And this poor girl, if she got a bump at school, would have 3 days off with pain. She was on morphine, gabapentin, everything. Couldn't sit in the car, couldn't do anything. And she's been on Trametinib now for about 4 or 5 years, and the pain is gone. It's all gone. She's off all those drugs. She goes to school. It's transformed her life. It's a fantastic result, even though it didn't even get smaller. You look at the scans, they look the same, but all the pain's gone. I guess it's just not as tight in there. Or this girl had one affecting her eye and growing and getting bigger, and now some years on, it's smaller. And as the face grows around it, the cosmetic effect is less. Here's another one. Again, this one was growing rapidly and had stopped. So good success. This poor boy had compression of the spinal cord in the neck. You know what happens if you compress your spinal cord in your neck? It's bad. He had 2 major operations to decompress it 6 months apart. So then we thought we better put him on Trametinib. Here's the tumor in here. And it hasn't grown back. In the low-grade gliomas, well, 6 patients here. They'd all had previous chemotherapy in the optic pathway or the brain stem. And all of them have stable disease or better. They've all stopped growing or gotten smaller. And now there's more than 6. There's probably 12. And again, we're hardly seeing any. I think I can think of one that grew, but yeah, it's a real winner. And you know, one day it'll end up the first-line treatment. You know, there are trials going on now around the world comparing the two. Are you better off to go on this sort of drug or the carboplatin? At the moment, we're not quite there. So now we come to the TiNT trial. How long have I been talking? Oh no, I'm good. Right, the TiNT trial is for Trametinib in neurofibromatosis tumours. And this is a trial that we're conducting in Australia and New Zealand, and Novartis makes Trametinib and they're giving us the drug for free. Next time someone complains about big pharma and drug companies and all, just think how nice Novartis are, because they're giving us the drug for free to treat 30 children with plexiform neurofibromas and 30 patients with optic pathway gliomas, and that have grown after the earlier chemotherapy, or the plexiforms that are the bad ones. And we're going to add to the world data on how effective it is, what do the tumours do, but like the Americans did in the SELUMETINIB, we're going to measure quality of life, we're going to measure pain scores, movement scores, functional scores, toxicities, etc., and add to the world experience in this, and access the drug for free, by the way. These drugs are obscenely expensive for melanoma. I don't know, think $100,000 for a year, which maybe you can do if it's only for a year, but it's not. It's probably for many years. So we're glad for Novartis giving us the drug. But something really interesting we're doing is what you call neurocognitive testing. That's sort of IQ testing, I guess. IQ testing would be the layman's term. So we're going to do, on children who are getting Trametinib for their tumour, we're going to measure all their IQ scores. The question is, does a MEK inhibitor make your brain work better, right? Hang on, let me go to the next slide. Will the brain work better if you can block that pathway that's stuck in the on position? Because some children with neurofibromatosis, as you know, have some learning difficulties and so on. So could this drug make your brain work better? Nothing to do with what it does to tumours. And there is actually evidence. There's these obscure lab experiments with mice and things that were given a MEK inhibitor, and they think they saw a benefit on how the brain worked in those mice. So there is some evidence, and the people that understand the brain better than I do, because I'm an oncologist, you know, but if you talk to the Catherine Norths of this world and the Christy Joneses, all those genetics neurology people, it's plausible that the brain might work better. So we're going to do all of these sophisticated IQ tests on the children that are going into the study. But what we also want to do for each child who's on Trametinib, because they need it, we want to identify what you call a control patient, someone else who has NF1, who's about the same age, but is not going to get Trametinib because they don't need Trametinib. And we want to do the IQ tests on them as well. And then over the period of, say, 2 years, we'll be able to see how do the IQ tests go in people on Trametinib and how do they go on people who are not on Trametinib. And then we're not withholding the drug from them. They just don't need the drug. Okay. All right. And this is just to show you the neurocognitive battery of tests in this trial. When I say it's an IQ test, well, it's more than just an IQ test. There's all these other, you know, tests of memory and processing and thinking and all sorts of tests neuropsychologists understand how to do. And for all that, it's sort of 90 minutes worth of testing, apparently, that you would do. And we're going to do it at time 0, then at 6 months, 12 months, and 24 months, and see if Trametinib can make you improve. That's the same sort of thing. And that's the TiNT trial. And Andrew Dodgson is in Christchurch in New Zealand. So he and I are the sort of main leadership, but we have others in the group from Melbourne. We have big time neuropsych people and geneticists and people all over the place. And now I tell you who we've got. We've got the newly appointed study coordinator has joined us, Carly. Carly is here. Carly, are you there? Unmute yourself and say hello.
Can you hear me?
We can. That's
Hi.
you. Everyone, can you see Carly waving there? Carly is in Melbourne. That's why she's a bit pale, been out of the sun. And she's our study coordinator, the international study coordinator for the trial, and has just joined us to make it all happen. So we're very excited Carly's joined us. She's worked on NF trials before, Trametinib, Dabrafenib, those drugs, and is well across it. So thanks for coming, Carly. So back to my slides. So you can mute yourself now. Oh, you did. Okay. And we're very grateful that CTF has been so generous in supporting our trial so that we could get it off the ground. Flicker of Hope are another supporter. And then we got a grant from the Medical Research Future Fund that also expanded our capacity so we could open it at all the centres, not just a handful of them. So that's the TiNT trial. We're very excited about it. Done a lot of work. It's been approved by the ethics committee. The drugs are in the country at Novartis, but they're here, ready to go. And now all the hospitals have to get local regulatory approval. So the ethics committee has said, yes, this is good science and it's ethical and all. Then we have to get each hospital to say, yes, we agree with you participating. We've got enough MRI scanners. We've got enough capacity to do this. The neuropsychology teams around the countries are getting trained up in what to do. And we hope that the site initiation visit can be in January. And then finally, we can get the study open. I just wanted to show you my protocol. Where is my protocol? Can you see my protocol now? Just nod your head. Yes. So this is what our protocol looks like. This is our National Children's Cancer Group as the study sponsor, and that's the protocol there. And you can see up here a standard protocol is 76 pages, and you know, to run a study, you've got to have consent forms for everybody written, and every hospital has a different wording that they want, particularly for that bit that says you're not allowed to get pregnant on the study. They, you know, one hospital says one thing, one says another. There's any number of documents, etc., that we have to have done to keep these regulators happy, and it's a big job. But it's all to protect people's rights and to make sure that we're not mucking around with people's goodwill and guinea pigs and so on. It's to make sure we're doing the right things and doing it properly. But we're close. And that's where I was going to stop and take questions. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So now, how long did I take? I took, can't tell.
No,
We've got about 15 minutes in our hour, but no rush. Questions. How do you want to do this, Natalie?
So in the reactions button at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to put your hand up. If you'd like to do that to ask a question, Meredith will ask you to unmute, and let's do it that way, just because there's so many of you on at the moment.
Bethany has her hand up. I'm just going to unmute you, Bethany. We can't see you though. If you want to.
Oh yeah, hi. I'm 23 years old and I have NF1, and I have a few plexiform neurofibromas like near my spine, and I go to Concord Hospital. How does the eligibility work? Does the hospital have to be part of it, or can you tell your neurologist about it?
Okay, so first off, we go back to our, oh, I've stopped sharing. Just give me a second. Study design, just a minute. Now, our study goes up to from 3 months of age to 25 years of age. Okay, so if you, having heard it all, and you and your doctors, Bethany, and you all felt that this was something to do,
Mm-hmm.
that would be interesting. Now, I think what we would do is we'd look for you to come to one of the children's hospitals, so Randwick or, well, it doesn't matter where you live, you're in Sydney, or Westmead.
I
Okay,
used to go to Westmead as a child.
Right, so what we'd do is we would ask the Children's Hospital for permission to take on a 23-year-old purely for the purposes of this study, and they would agree to it. So long as we said if you needed to end up in hospital, you'd be in an adult hospital, right? But for the purposes of the trial, that's how we do it. Now, I should say, by the way, that in younger children, Novartis sometimes will make the drug available outside of a study free of charge, but we haven't had much success with that with older patients. So people in your age group, in the adult age group, Novartis, they have this program of providing drug for selected patients in children, but we haven't had much joy in your age group, and it's obscenely expensive to pay for. So yeah, the trial would be a good option if you and your doctors felt that things were bad enough to warrant going down that path.
Okay, so do you need to have pain to be able to be part of the trial?
Well, no, you don't need to have pain, but you need to have, it would be a plexiform neurofibroma that is judged to be enough of a problem, whether it's pain or disfigurement or restricting movement or compressing a nerve or something like that. So just having them there on a scan, but they're sort of minding their own business and not causing a big problem. I'd frankly tell people don't do this, okay, because it's a big deal, okay. But if they met some of those other reasons, that would be a reason to look at it. We still don't know the long-term effects of the drug, particularly, you know, they start as a 1-year-old and they're on it for 20 years. We're still learning that, so we're not to know. We don't know what effect might it have on fertility very well. I speak to the melanoma doctors and I say, what do you know? And they look at me and say, well, we don't know much, because, you know, melanoma is a bad disease and a lot of their patients are older. So they don't know much. So there's some stuff to factor in and not just take it on without good reason. But if there was good reason, this, yeah, you know, we'd want to see someone, yeah, make it happen. Okay, who was next? Someone else put their hand up.
Shami.
Shami, hello. Oh, you muted yourself again.
Sorry. Hey guys, can you hear me with these on?
Yes, yes.
Cool. Just on the fertility thing, so I've got a 9-year-old boy. He's got a plexiform that's running from his hip bone down all the way through and wrapped up into his left testicle. That's causing a lot of pain. So they're looking at possibly some sort of chemo treatment. So on this, obviously there's a risk with chemo of him becoming sterile as well, but is there obviously going to be a smaller risk on this sort of drug, or is it, you still don't know, I guess?
Okay, well, I guess the right answer is I don't know. Now, by the way, they are saying it's a plexiform neurofibroma.
Yeah, so it's become all wrapped up. He's basically, we had a little fibroma cut out and it looked like he had some bulging of the bowels, but then they investigated it and he's been having a lot of pain.
Okay.
So
Well,
yeah, it's basically running the whole way through.
I expect if they're talking about drugs and they're saying it's a plexiform neurofibroma, they'll be talking about these drugs, surely.
Well, they said they wanted to put him on some intravenous one, which would be the same as kids that have, I can't remember what it was, leukemia.
Huh. All right, well, okay. If it's a plexiform neurofibroma, simple, straightforward, no other consideration there. Mostly I'd be looking at this class of drugs. So there might be something about this that's not quite typical, all right? Now, infertility in males. Okay, so I guess again, we don't know. I guess we don't know what is the effect of long-term trametinib in males. We don't know.
Yeah.
If I had to guess, I would guess, I bet it's okay, but I don't have data. It's just, you know, I would suspect it's all right, except for the problem that it might be for 10 or 20 years. And that's, no one in melanoma land does that. So it's unknown territory somewhat, but I've got a feeling it might be all right. Some of the chemotherapy drugs, like that carboplatin for the optic nerve, by the way, I wouldn't think that would cause infertility either. So that mightn't be, anyway, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Sajiko.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for putting this together. I might be the only American joining today, and I'm going to keep my video off because in New Jersey, where I'm located, it is almost 9 p.m. at night, and so we are already in our pajamas and getting ready for bed. But I had two general questions. The first one is, I'm curious about the state of research when it comes to prevention. And so perhaps the next step in research is kind of thinking about using MEK inhibitors as prevention. But I think this kind of goes in line with what was just talked about in terms of kind of the unknown long effects. I'm just curious if you know of the kind of the state of things in terms of prevention. And then my second question is, for the TiNT trial, is there any plan on measuring potential decreases in cutaneous and subcutaneous neurofibromas?
Yeah, okay. So the first question in prevention, you know, I haven't heard anything in that space. You got to remember that there's a group of patients with NF1 who don't get a plexiform neurofibroma, or if they do, they don't get a very problematic one.
Right.
So it would be a bit tricky to work out how to, who to pick to treat with the drug. And it doesn't seem like just giving a tiny low dose is good enough. It would probably have to be the full dose. And so that would be hard to work out. The one place where I'd be interested in prevention is, there's that group that progressed to a malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor. And we don't know yet, but in people with a plexiform neurofibroma who are treated with a MEK inhibitor, it would be good to know, are they less likely to progress to a malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor, which is a very bad tumor, right? That would be nice to know, but it's very hard to work out because all you can do is compare them to old patients that didn't get a MEK inhibitor in the past and their rate of getting malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumors. And you don't know if they're similar patients, really. It's very hard to work it out, so we don't know the answer, but it would be good to know if that were the case. Back on prevention, we have put in a grant application elsewhere to do circulating tumor DNA testing, right? That's to, we're learning that cancers and that some certain other tumors can shed DNA just into the blood, and you can pick it up in the blood. So we're trying to work out, could we pick up the malignant peripheral nerve sheath tumor within a plexiform on a blood test? But this is years away from being done or proved or anything that you could then act on. So that's something in that space. Now, your second question was
about the TiNT trial and following subcutaneous.
Yeah. No, we didn't put that in as something to measure. Okay, but you're right, it's of interest, isn't it? What's happening elsewhere, off the ball, as we say in rugby playing Australia. Yeah, no. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sashiko. Now was it someone called Amber said she had a question?
Oh, Mark has a question.
Thank you.
Hello, Mark.
Hi. Sorry, I just wanted to ask about the treatment with Trametinib of the optic pathway gliomas. I think you had 6 people on your slide, but had mentioned that you'd treated up to 12 now, and almost all of them had showed stability or better. So if you know off the top of your head how many actually showed improvement or shrinkage of those patients treated?
I'd say about 2/3. I think about half, maybe half to half, 2/3, something like that would have been smaller. But that's off the top of my head. I haven't formally analysed it. Yeah, but we consider it a win if it just stops getting bigger, of course. But it's nice for things to get smaller. We like that. And yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we're in the situation. We've got a son who's been on a couple of courses of chemo and has had shrinkage at times, and then it's regrowing again, and now being suggested for Trametinib. But he is at a stage where the tumour is causing some issues at the moment. So yeah, stability is not really good enough at the moment. And yeah.
So, and also remember, I didn't mention it, but surgery has a role sometimes in these settings, depending on what it is. You don't like to operate on the optic nerve, that's for sure, because it's, it's vision. But elsewhere, sometimes surgery can be an option. But yeah, sorry, I don't really have the data off the top of my head.
But you think it was a decent proportion? Yes,
and in the SELUMETINIB trial, you saw it was 40%, and but 96% didn't get bigger at 2 years, but a 40% partial response. Now, remember, a partial response is a full 50% reduction, not in volume, but in size this way. So if you do pi r squared, that's probably, or cubed, whatever it is, that's going to be more than a 50% shrinkage in its overall volume. You with me in the maths? But it's a 50%. So, it's 25% shrinkage. Might be progress, might get someone out of trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, we've got Amber, and then Kirsty has some questions as well, and there's another one in the chat. So we'll
okay. Amber, I can see you.
Hi.
Hello.
I've got a 5-year-old daughter who about 6 months ago was diagnosed with an optic nerve glioma, both eyes as it kind of goes into the brain. She's only had the one MRI and then obviously the appointment with the oncologist. She's got another one booked for January where they'll obviously see if it's grown or what's happening with that. I just wasn't sure whether because she's not having any vision problems, she might not qualify for this. They might want to keep looking at it. But I wasn't sure if maybe she would still be able to help out with your trial with the
control arm,
IQ testing, that kind of thing.
Okay, right. So first I should have mentioned that with the optic pathway tumours, the optic nerve tumours, gliomas, there's a whole bunch of them that never get to see an oncologist. So the neurologists and the genetics teams they know it's there, and they're monitoring the vision and they're monitoring the scan, and sometimes they just sit there and they're not enough of a problem for us to need to do anything. So this is a very standard thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Wait and watch. And particularly, what's the vision doing? Michael Fisher was out from Philadelphia earlier this year, and the big wig, you know, he said, I don't care about the scan. Well, he does care about the scan, but what's the vision doing?
Well,
Right, so that's something, sounds like your situation.
Happy, yeah. So she's been getting like 6 to 8 monthly ophthalmology appointments for a long time, and they haven't noticed any change.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so in answer to your question, yes, we would welcome such a person being a control. So anyone who is interested to be a control or put up a child of theirs to be a control, we'd very much welcome them. And even if they've got one of the tumours, so long as it's one of the tumours that doesn't need treatment, in good faith, doesn't need treatment, then they'd be good to be a control. And we've even allowed for the fact that what if something then happened and they did need treatment? Well, they could then cross over into the treatment side of the study. We don't think that'll be common, but yes, being a control doesn't then eliminate you from moving on to the treatment arm if things went the wrong way.
Yeah, so she's got like, I guess her next MRI and then oncology and everything in the middle of January. So I guess that'll be the deciding of what happens next. Yeah,
well, I suppose if everyone still thinks that treatment isn't needed, you might be a good candidate for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it does come an age in NF gliomas where they tend to sort of burn out and stop growing.
When is that?
Yeah, when you ask.
Can it be tomorrow?
I think 8 or 10, I think. 8 or 10 years, I think.
Is that so? If she had an optic nerve glioma and it sort of was at a point when she got to 8 or 10, would it usually stop, or can they continue to grow?
Well, look, they can. I'm just saying a lot of them stop.
Okay.
Nothing's ever very absolute. A lot of them stop, but there's ones that keep growing and keep growing and keep growing.
Cool.
And but oftentimes they sort of give it up. They're still there, but they're just sitting there. Yeah.
You do it. So I mean, she's being seen at the Queensland Children's Hospital in Brisbane. Will that be? We'll be doing it out of.
They're in it, and Renee, I think, just asked who's in it. Every children's.
I was just about to type into the chat all the hospitals that are.
Oh, thank you, Carly. If you do that.
That's that information as well, because some people won't have access to the chat or be able to see that, so we'll make sure we have a copy of that too.
All right, but while Carly's doing that, the answer is all the children's hospitals in Australia and Hobart and Auckland and Christchurch. That's the answer. And so that's John Hunter, Monash, Royal Children's and Monash in Melbourne. Westmead, Randwick, Newcastle in New South Wales. Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Hobart, Auckland, Christchurch, and they're the ones. And somehow between us all, we have to find a way to treat the young adults who don't normally get their foot in the door of a children's hospital, but for this, I think we have to find a way to make it happen. So that's going to be on the chat. The other thing that a question just came, who do we contact? Now, Carly has an email address that we can, is there a way, Renee, we can
we can we'll send around a whole group email after the back of this as well.
All right, so there's a standard email that goes to Carly and then she can find us. And volunteers to be, even if you just volunteered, look, if you need a control of this age, call me up. Because we're going to try to match them up a bit. If it's a 7-year-old that's on the drug, look for a 6 to 8-year-old not on the drug. Yeah, if you could just let them know you might be willing, that'd be good. And by the way, the controls that go in the study, they get I don't know, it's $50 or something to cover the petrol and tolls, and they should get free parking at the hospital, and they will get the results of the tests, and those tests might be useful and informative and things that you could share with your treating team and your teachers and so on.
Cost about $1,400. So that's really good.
Oh, do they? Okay. Yeah. That's right. So a big panel of tests like that is, so that's something. Yeah.
Okay, we might go to Kirsty.
And then I think we might have to call it quits after that. Meredith, just because we're running out of time. So anyone else that does have questions, feel free to shoot them through to support@CTF, and we will make sure that we ask Geoff any of your remaining questions and get you the answers that you're looking for.
Kirsty's got a Christmas tree at least. That's.
Kirsty, I can't seem to unmute you, so you're going to have to.
I think I'm
She's
unmuted.
unmuted.
We can hear you.
Yep, okay. Okay, I have two questions. The first one was about the side effects. You mentioned skin, intestinal tract and that sort of thing. But what about long-term use for like the kidneys and liver? Do we have any showing signs that there might be some sort of issues there?
So I don't. In the patients on the trial, we had to be doing all these blood tests all the time, and the blood tests are a fairly okay measure of a pretty good measure of kidney function and liver function. And I don't think I've seen a single abnormality, and that's in kids that have been on it for up to 4 or 5 years now. I don't think I've seen a single abnormality in those tests. Now, there's more sophisticated ways to check liver and kidney function, but they're pretty good screening tests and pretty reliable. So that's pretty good. Now, the heart echo tests were done because in old people with melanoma, there were some people that got impaired heart function. Not heart attacks, but the muscle of the heart weakened and, heart failure. So they all had all these ultrasounds of the heart continuously, and I don't think we ever saw an abnormality, but there might have, I can't say it'll never happen. Now, so we still do test that a little. There's another thing you have to do, an ECG, the one with the wires on your chest to look at the electric waves of your heart. There's a small number of people in the community that have this particular ECG abnormality that you can't give them Trametinib. So we always have to screen for that. But I've never seen one that we couldn't treat, but it's out there as a thing. So I guess when I think what might be long-term problems that we not to know about, well, we'll want to see about growth. In the trial, we were x-raying their knee every 6 or 12 months because it shows the growth plate at your knee, and it's you wouldn't want a drug that made it fuse. When you stop growing, it fuses. We wouldn't want to see premature fusing of the growth plates, but we haven't seen it yet, but that's something. Fertility, of course. And then if someone wanted to get pregnant while on the drug, well, you'd have to caution against that. You would have to think you got to go off the drug for X months before and until well after. So that's new ground. We're not to know there. Yeah. Okay. You had a second question.
I do. Okay, so thinking of the neurocognitive side of things, after the trials and let's say everything's successful and it becomes on the market as a treatment option, if you've got children with NF that have significant neurocognitive issues and intellectual disabilities, other processing issues, do you think it would be then offered to help if like the findings show that it does help? Do you think that would become a treatment option for that?
Right. So, but to put this in perspective, if we show that the kids on Trametinib have a better IQ trajectory than kids not, firstly, we'll all win the Nobel Prize. Well, no, we won't, but it will be. That would be a huge, huge discovery, right? That would be of such enormous implications to the entire world of NF if there was a meaningful benefit attached to the drug. That would be huge, and I can't say we've got such robust mouse data that of course it's going to work. It's not in that league. It's very speculative, and it may well not be the case now. So if that were the case, the whole world would change of NF if a meaningful difference was made, and the whole world would go berserk. Looking at what do we do now, and the drug companies will be very happy with themselves, I expect, because a whole group of people then that you might want to treat long term. Anyway, so. That would be the aim, though. Yes, if it worked really well, I'd be saying, well, why don't we give it to everyone? but it's very out there at the moment. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
There was just one more question that was sitting in the chat for a little while from Andrew saying, assuming that someone is on the trial, what happens after the trial ends? Do they continue to get the drugs?
Yes.
Are they up for 100 grand a year?
No. We'll get it via compassionate
grounds.
Yes.
And is that for a certain number of time, like for a period of time, or
I think
eventually?
No, it should just be ongoing.
Right.
With Novartis. Yeah.
Sorry, Geoff, can I just ask a question? We've had a call from somebody who has a young adult child, but outside the bounds of your trial criteria. What is the best way to try and progress this? Is it through the compassionate access scheme? Is it through approaching the drug companies directly?
Now, all right. So do you mean they're not in Australia or New Zealand?
No, they're here, but in their 30s.
Right. That's a problem. If it's the company's compassionate access program has been confined to children, and we've, I've helped some people make some applications from adult land, and they haven't been successful. So, so that's a problem. I guess I would, if it's for a plexiform neurofibroma, I guess I would ask their treating team to explore with their hospital if there was any way to pay for it, but they might say no. They might as well lodge an application for compassionate access, but expect that they will say no. It's a big problem, I don't have a solution for them because it is. I don't know if it's 100,000, but it's it's expensive. It's beyond the means of most people to spend year after year after year. So I think, and maybe they should get their doctor to contact me and I can thrash it out a bit more with them if they want.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Geoff.
Sorry, one last thing. In time, and your group, you're perfect people to lobby government this is what you call an orphan drug indication. Melanoma, thousands of patients. This situation, 10 or 20 or 50. Why would, the company be bothered going to the PBS, getting the TGA to pay? This is the sort of thing, and we do Senate submissions on this sort of thing all the time. This is where you could really lobby government to say, we need you to pay for this. There's not that many patients. It can transform their lives. This is really a good place for you to work on this. And we'd be happy to help you.
Yeah, it's actually something that we're working on in the background that we'll be pushing out, hopefully soft launching this month and then pushing out in January to provide the tools that community members can actually then use to do just that. Stay tuned for that space. We're just a bit run out of our feet, but it is happening.
Okay, sorry, Natalie, I keep talking.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. It's exactly right, and it's as Renee has just pointed out, something that we've been looking at in various forms in terms of lobbying government and starting to get a more systemic advocacy approach to the CTF up and running as well. So, thank you for taking the time today, Geoff, for answering all of our questions. As usual, you have an amazing way of explaining the very complicated world of MEK inhibitors and plexiform neurofibromas in a way that we can all understand, which is brilliant. And I hope everyone has got a lot out of today. And as I mentioned before, if you do have further questions that you go away and think of, send them through to support@ctf.org.au and we'll pass them on to Geoff and make sure that you get an appropriate response. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. Thanks. Have a good Christmas. Hanukkah.
You too.
New Year, whatever. Okay, I'll head off. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Geoff. Bye.
Thanks, Carly.